to begin by recognizing that the Clay Studio stands on the indigenous territory known as Lenapehoking, the traditional homelands of the Lenni Lenape people. We would like to take a moment to reflect on the role of the Lenape as the past, present, and future stewards of the land, and the role all of us can join in for their traditions and respect for caring for the land and each other. So as probably every single person on this call knows, the Clay Studio was founded in 1974 by 5 artists in search of workspace and creative community. The Clay Studio was envisioned as a stepping stone for students fresh out of art school, offering affordable studio space and shared equipment. Today, we like to say that we are renowned for our unique ability to serve all levels of students, scholars, and community members while broadening ceramics as a contemporary art form. So for our 50th anniversary this year, we're really excited to have many people, these 2 amazing women included, many people who are on the Zoom with us, be part of our Founders and Foundations exhibition downstairs. I would be remiss if I didn't say, if you'd like to help us keep this programming free, feel free to donate to the exhibition fund, which you can find if you go to our website and click the support button. So first, we are excited to have Claire Rodgers join us. Claire has been working in clay and teaching ceramics for over 50 years. She came to Philadelphia as a resident artist at the Clay Studio in 1976 and continued her involvement there as an associate artist, exhibiting artist, and executive board member. As a ceramic artist, she's been a neighborhood pottery school director, an owner, manager, teacher, and workshop leader. Claire has led pottery walking tours of both the Philadelphia Art Museum and the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. Claire exhibits ceramics in large sculptural forms from her studio in Philadelphia at Gallery 37, a destination for art for living, in Milford, Delaware, and at Veduta Gallery in Cresco, Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Janice Merendino is a teaching artist, former college professor, and one of the 5 founders of the Clay Studio. She also founded the Branch Out Project, where she teaches executives and other non-artists how to use drawing to stimulate creative thinking and innovative approaches in the workplace. Janice also studies calligraphy privately and has given calligraphy workshops at the Philadelphia Museum of Art and Shifuso, the Japanese house in Fairmount Park. In 2018, she was awarded the Distinguished Alumni Award from Moore College of Art and the Harrison Prize from the Woodmere Art Museum. Presently, Janice teaches and designs and teaches workshops for accessible programs at the Philadelphia Museum of Art for people with learning and physical disabilities, including a self-portrait workshop for people with Parkinson's disease and veterans struggling with PTSD. Amazing, both amazing women. I'm going to start by asking the question that I ask everyone, which is, how and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art? And I'm going to pin the things because Josie reminded me to do that. Thank you, Josie. Do we have a volunteer to go first? Janice, since you
sure.
Yeah. No,
I'll
I
go,
was going to
I'll
say
go
she's not
first.
coughing right now. But, yeah.
For me, it wasn't such a brave decision. It was kind of more of a survival decision. I think a lot of young artists maybe can say that. I was pretty shy as a kid, and art was the one activity where I didn't have to socialize so much. I was fortunate to be surrounded by cousins. So I had a great childhood that way. But I was always interested in making and doing and seeing the results of what came out of my mind. And art school was pretty much a given for me very early on. And I got a lot of support for that, whereas I didn't get so much support for my language skills or my math skills or anything like that. So, you know, those few words of encouragement that you give a kid, they may hear it as that's the only thing they can do, so they might as well go after it. So yeah, for me, it was kind of something that just suited my personality.
Janice, thank you for your I love that you sort of answered a question which I was going to ask you, which is when people say that they always knew that it was a given. I always think, well, you must have had support. So you started to say that you were supported in that idea. Your parents were on board with thinking about you going into the arts. And it's interesting also to think about the idea that, you know, you hear praise as a child and it
Mhm.
definitely points you in a direction. Do you remember any specific moments in your sort of, you know, middle school, high school years when you had a particular moment when you know, you say it was a given you were going to go to art school, but there's a moment when you realize
Yeah,
like,
no,
oh, that's a
yeah,
thing. You can do this for a living.
that's a good question. I think, you know, I gravitated towards the arts very early on. But I was also very realistic about it because, you know, kids would come over and say, "Oh, Janice, you're an artist. You're an artist." And I'd think about, well, you know, the reason I'm any good at this is because I do it all the time. It wasn't it wasn't like I didn't really feel I had any gifts. You know, and this is one of the things I talk about in my drawing classes all the time is that, you know, if you drew something and nobody praised you for it, you know, you would just, some people hear that internally as I'm never going to go near that again, or I'm not any good at it. I was on the basketball court and missed the ball 3 times, and I threw up my hands and said, "See, I'm not an athlete. I'm an artist." You know, so we build our lives on so little evidence, and I always felt that you know, you may throw out all of the arts because you can't draw or you can't do this or that. And so that doesn't mean you should get rid of all of it. There are lots of aspects that you can try. So very, I think very early on, I was pretty realistic about the skill-based idea of learning something. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I get encouragement. I did get encouragement for that part.
Yeah.
Of fear, you know, how are you going to support yourself? Absolutely. So I was one of the first double majors at Moore. I was a double major in art education and in ceramics because my parents just didn't, first of all, they thought I was going to go into fashion design, and I did a left turn and went into pottery. Um, and yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well, that's interesting that you were the first double major. It would seem like that would have been a natural thing at an art school that would have happened all the time. But
no, I guess they just didn't think, yeah, I don't know why.
huh,
Art education and ceramics.
yeah, right. Wonderful. Okay, so now we're going to turn to Claire and ask Claire the same question.
I don't know, brave is a very, it's a word that means a lot of different things. You know, if you started when you were young, you're young. And I don't know that young people are that brave. But at any rate, so I went to, I started out as a biochemistry major. Okay. And so then but I was going to be illustrator of science textbooks. That was my idea. But then I got married and I went down and worked in a chemistry lab for 5 years while my husband was getting a degree in architecture. So, you know, I didn't, what happened was really is that there was a person there teaching pottery. I went and took classes from her. And, you know, here I was doing chemistry all day. And so it was all about, she was teaching glazing class, and it was fascinating to me because there were some similarities there. And she told me about Penland School of Crafts. So here I was working all the time while my husband was at school. And I thought, I'm going to Penland for 3 weeks this summer, you know? And so I did. And that's where you see people in all walks of art life, deciding whether or not, you know, they're going to do this full time. Is this going to be their life? And then there's people there that it is their life and they're teaching you. And it's just well, it's a fabulous place. It still is. I've been there in a couple of years ago. I'm assuming it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Booming.
then I even dragged my sister to that place too. And so she happens to be on the line. I see her. But at any rate, so that was that brave? No, I was just trying to have a good time. And somehow in those 5 years while I was working, I finally decided that this is what I really wanted to do. And then my husband graduated and got a job. So I decided I needed a kiln and a wheel, and, and I set up a studio in my basement there. And we moved after that, and we moved to Cleveland, Ohio, and I had a studio there. I always say I made more money there than I ever did since. But anyway, there was a really nice gallery there that, saw my work, and I had students, and it was all, I just fell into that. And I don't know, I often think so the word art is another thing. I've always told all my students, you're born an artist. Everyone's born an artist. Anyone and they always tell me, no, I'm not an artist. But anyway, anyone that if you know them well enough, where their art is in them. Everyone's got art in them. I don't know, to be a famous artist, well known, that's just, a lot of times that's just luck. So that part doesn't really matter. Of course we're all artists. I think, everyone tells you there's flora and fauna, plants and animals, but there's also objects. And to me, I'm an object person. I think I always was. The fact that you could make an object and make it the way you wanted it to look was really important to me. And I always loved doing that. And then, they'd have these fairs where you go outside, and, one time all the wind blew it all over and all my pop crashed. I mean, that's a stupid idiot, not bravery. But was one, Kathy Dalzell and I once, and we borrowed Catherine Nero's, that, how you're in a show and you have to have a booth.
Mhm.
This is real craziness, because I mean, it's ridiculous. All the work you put into this booth, and you put up your work, and people would walk by, and a lot of times they think you're just the salesperson, or else they think you're the artist, and they start talking to you about, oh, how did you make that, and how do you do those glazes and stuff like that. And this one person walked by at that show that Kathy and I did, and he looked at the pots, and he said, "This is the work of a deranged mind." And I said, "Oh, really? You think that?" And I said, I'm the artist. I did it. And he backed off, oh my God, and who is she? And and sort of ran away. And so once again, so am I brave to be putting that's what it is.
Yeah.
When you're an artist, you're putting your work out and having people look at it. And I've never felt, even then, when someone said that to me, it never occurred to me that there was something wrong with my work. I've always liked my own work. And a lot of people do, I think. I think it's just the way I feel about it. And I guess well, the other bravery thing, though, this is really interesting, because I just read an article in the paper last Sunday, and it was about people of my age. You were expected to, after high school, either get a job or go to college. And, sort of depending probably on your finances and stuff like that, family's finances. There was no such thing as student loans. You just either got a job or you went to college, something like that. Now, that's just the way I saw my life. And it's probably unfair. There's probably certain, socioeconomic groups that didn't even have that ability. But nevertheless, so that's what we did. We all left. I think of the whole group of us that were here 50 years ago, we were just told, go off and you live your life. And so there was something like the clay studio, where you could sort of work your way in there, and there was kilns, and there was wheels, and you could do something like that. I think so. The bravery thing is also a financial thing, and I don't think, I was working for the first 6 years, so then I thought, oh, I get 6 years to be a potter, right? And after 6 years of being a potter, it's very hard not to be a potter. And I found when I went back and worked in an office and things, and I found that when I wasn't doing pottery, I just got angry. And I guess a lot of people might think I'm sort of angry anyway.
I've never thought that.
But anyway, so that's it. That's sort of my whole story about that.
No, that's great. I mean, so you offered me a great transition. So in a moment, we're going to transition to memories of the clay studio, but artists always say, oh, it wasn't brave. It's just what I had to do, but it is brave. And you hit on it. It's the fact that you are willing to put your emotions, your feelings, your creativity out on display and just let other people look at them, is one of the ways that I think it's brave. And like any decision in our lives, we have to wake up every morning and decide that that's what we're doing today, whether whatever job or relationship or anything is. So it's a decision you have to keep making over and over again. I'm an object person, and I will contend that I am not an artist, but it doesn't mean I'm not creative. There's one particular artist I know who is definitely an artist who says that she is not an artist because she can't draw a straight line. It's like, why would you make these beautiful pockets? Why would you have
It's like Janice not learning basketball. No, if she tried to draw a straight line, she could.
And probably. Plus they're rulers, so it's not a problem.
That's true.
Okay, thank you both. And now we are gonna go back to Janice and ask her to, I think I'll just leave us both up there. Can you talk a little bit about the early moments of founding the Play Studio and then some memories? I know that we've talked about this a lot lately, so you may feel like you're repeating yourself, but right now it's being recorded and there are new people on the Zoom. So
Well, that's
tell us
good.
a little bit about that.
I think as a little bit of background, and maybe for me, this is where the bravery came in, is that I applied for a fellowship in my junior year at Moore College of Art. And it was I wanted to go to Japan and study using that word very loosely, since I was a beginner student. I was only had one semester in clay. But I wanted to go to 4 of the 6 ancient kiln sites and see what I could see and stay and learn as much as I could learn. I had a fabulous itinerary set up and I didn't get the fellowship. So I decided I would borrow the money anyway and go on my own. So there was a bit of bravery in that, especially since it was the first time I had ever traveled by myself anywhere, let alone to Asia.
Yeah.
This relates to that first slide, Jen, if you want to pull up that first slide, and I'll just talk about that, because that was the year before we started the Clay Studio. And I had only had one ceramics class, but what was so yeah, so that's the first slide, and I listed the places in Japan that I had been, and again, I didn't know what I was looking at, so I just took pictures of everything and figured that when I would get back, my teacher, Ken, would tell me what what the techniques were and what I was seeing. But I stayed at least a week or 2 weeks in each of these areas and just recorded everything that I could. So that was 1973, and we started the Clay Studio in 1974. And that was right at the, I had just been coming off of this trip. I was optimistic. I was gung-ho. I was amazed at the field of ceramics, and that trip was so magical. I had met people that I had just read about in books. I actually had tea with Hamada Shoji, and 10 years later had lunch with Izumo Noguchi, and just Japan was this magical place for me. So those early days for me were, I think, the most significant part for me was that I went from being a student to being a colleague. All of a sudden I was in a group of people who had more experience than I had, and who graciously accepted me, and where I was in my skill level. And that was sort of the main thing that I think about when I think about the Clay Studio now, is that openness and that welcoming feeling for beginners. You know, we kind of embrace each other because of this material that we all love so much. And it doesn't matter what your techniques are or how skillful you are, we just kind of, you know, are open to it and open to sharing. So that was an early on memory for me of the clay studio. I was really in a good place in my life. I had just done this amazing trip, and I was being asked if I wanted to join a group that was just 5 of us that quickly became a group of 12.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so we'll come back to this in a minute. Claire, do you want to talk about your early moments coming to the Play Studio, the memories?
Sure. I mean, I think that we arrived in 1976 when there was some awful
Bicentennial.
disease.
Oh,
At some hotel.
yeah, Legionnaires.
There you go. And I don't know, we were driving around. I saw 4th Street Pottery, which was down on South Street. And I walked in there and I said, was there anywhere where you can, you know, work doing clay? And the man there told me the clay studio. So I don't know. It's just not like you couldn't look it up somewhere. I must have called. Maybe and talked to anyway, I got this feeling I had to have a resume and a portfolio. So I put all that together and came to see Ken, we had just been raccoing, and his face was all black with soot. From raccoing in the basement. Are we allowed to tell that story?
Sure.
No.
They can't find us anymore, but they would have if.
But they had this bread mixer that's how they made clay, which was incredible. The room was full of dust. The whole basement was just black, but it was high ceilings, right? That's what made it so great. At any rate, it was a wonderful place, and I had my own equipment, but I had nowhere to put it up. So I somehow we had that stored, and I sort of moved into some little cubby up on the 2nd floor. And it was just exciting. It was what Janice is talking about, just to be exciting to be around people of all different levels with all different ideas. You know, there was someone there, Nancy Turner, Kathy Turner,
Oh.
who was a production potter. And I just thought that, oh, wow, maybe that's how you make money. So, I started, and then we had shows and things, and, for Christmas, and, Ruth Duckworth came by one day, just sat down and talked to us. It was just amazing. The whole place was amazing. And I dragged Jill Bonovitz and Amy Sarner and Kathy down to Penland. I'd say dragged. I always, I just talk people into things because I talk too much. At any rate, and we just had a wonderful time down there. It was a great place. We had lunch on the loading docks, and it was kind of like, for me, maybe it's like when you go to college now. See, even then they didn't have masters of ceramics, but now they do. So imagine you're going to, some fabulous place, and with all this equipment and all these other kids that, talk clay. So it was great. It was great.
That's great. We have in Founders and Foundations one of the pieces that Kathy made while you were at Penland.
Yes.
It's in the gallery, so you can come and see that if you're not here in person. Thanks for those memories. Now I think we'll turn to back to the PowerPoint.
And Bob Turner.
Yeah, that was a workshop with Bob Turner. Right?
So I could sculpture instead.
And
not knowing who Bob Turner was. Oh. So I had done two tours with the with potters there. Oh, and the incredible thing there was that you didn't pay for your clay. You could have as much as you want, giant barrels of clay that had all been, mixed and everything. And so you could that's what I did. I mean, you would be there at midnight, throwing, and nobody cared as long as you just sort of tossed it away. And it was a great teaching thing for anyone that was trying to learn how to throw. They were kick wheels too, so you had to work at it. Okay, sorry.
No, that's great. I love it. And you still remember that you didn't take that class with Bob.
I know, it's sculpture is my life. I wrote it in, the first thing I wrote in my book. The guy said, everyone, I want you to write down in your book, sculpture is my life.
But there's pots down in the gallery. There's sculptures too.
Yes.
They're just round sculptures. Great. Okay, let's go back to our PowerPoint and Janice. Oh, yay.
This is great. Okay, this is great. So you're going to see some the work is mixed up from early work to more recent work. But basically what I am amazed by, and I guess most of us when we look back at our work, how autobiographical the shapes are, the forms are. I almost feel like the shapes that I was doing early on in my life seem to represent who I was at that point. They're almost like visual metaphors for what I was, how I was feeling about myself and what was going on in my life. But these two bowls were bowls that I did when I returned after a trip to Japan, and I was challenged by a museum curator there to make a tea bowl. And after I came back from Japan, I was all overwhelmed and confused because when you're in Tamba, you know, you have to make the foot a certain way. And then if you're in Bizen, then there's another way that you make the foot. And there were so many rules and regulations about it that I kind of threw up my hands. And I told the museum curator that I wasn't going to make a bowl in any particular style except my own. And I sent it to him. And I got a lovely note back saying that he had a special tea ceremony with my bowl. And they couldn't believe that it was made by an American woman. So I took that as a real compliment. So I have lots of stories about those early days and that first trip that I would love at some point to share with potters, because there's just so many delightful little stories about meeting people and meeting other potters there. Then the piece on the vertical piece was when I did get back from Japan, during the trip there, I also got interested in ink on paper. And oh, okay. I'll talk about that.
Oh, wait,
once.
is that what you want me to?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. And the difference between working with clay, which is a lot of delayed gratification. You make something, but then you don't see the final piece for months later, versus working with the ink, which is very direct and immediate, like clay. It responds to every movement, every gesture, your speed, your pressure, all of that, the same immediacy that you have in clay, except when you're working with ink on paper, you can see what you're getting. And I found that I needed to straddle both. I needed to constantly keep both alive, because there were times where I could be patient and wait to see the results, and times where I had an idea and I just wanted to get it out. So I've continued to work in both medium with all of my work. The paper is layered. I use lots of handmade paper called washi, and I use the same kind of ink you would use in calligraphy. And I found that the next slide is a tray with a couple trays with the little boxes. There was a low period where I was close to giving up on clay and just starting to work with paper. I was running out of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And a Japanese friend sent me a book in the mail, and it was a very famous Kyoto potter, and all he made were little boxes. And it just was exactly what I needed to hear. Janice, it's okay if you just want to make little boxes. So I spent a lot of time making little boxes, and then making the trays to go with them, or mixing and matching. And I found that this was because I like to control the environment that things were seen in. So if I would do a tray, or if I would do a paper piece, and put a ceramic piece in front of it, I was able to control how people would view it. You can go a couple more slides. And I worked in Raku for a while, and then I worked on these large pieces, which were around the time that I lost my father, and then I lost my uncle 7 years later. And when I look back at these pieces again, autobiographical forms feel like I was dealing with grief, and the clenching of your jaw when you're dealing with a grieving situation. And you can go on to the other slides too. These pieces here, again, were me mimicking or trying to do a new idea about the Tokonoma area, which is the alcove of a Japanese house where you would be presented with a piece of pottery, usually a flower arrangement, and then a scroll. And I wanted to kind of, again, take my two loves of ink on paper and take my love of clay. And these were black porcelain. I started making black porcelain for a while, and combine them. And then the last slide there, again, is the continuation of that other series of working through grief. And then my continuing fascination is with clay as the idea of bones or structures, and then the vulnerability of paper with the clay as if it's skin. And I don't think I've exploited that idea quite enough yet. I still, if I keep working in clay, this is something I continue to want to go back to, is combining those two materials together and seeing what I can do. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Janice. So the backing is paper, and then
Yes, yeah, ink on paper, and those probably have some pastel in with them.
So I was realizing as you were talking that you all can see the presenter view. We here on our screen can see what we're supposed to see, but I'm gonna go back.
Oh, yeah, I see
Either way.
presenter view. Okay.
Why not just keep changing? Okay, so I'm gonna move you guys over, and then we will ask Claire to share about her work. And make this smaller. Okay. I know it's not perfect, but I think it'll turn out better for the viewers. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think, what did I write down? 1994 or something, I made this piece. But I'd always been working with globes. And part of that is this teacher I had in North Carolina, in Raleigh, North Carolina is where we lived. And that's what she made, these closed forms. The whole thing fascinated me. You know, she would blow into them and make them blow up like a balloon. So I spent a whole summer at 3 weeks at Penland, you know, this one time, just making 20, I don't know, 200 of these things and blowing into them, and they would crack, you know, and I'd been reading Carlos Castaneda about the crack between the worlds. So I had that whole series of things I totally loved. I don't know where any of those are, but this piece, I started, whenever that is, what is that, 20 years ago? 30 years ago? Anyway.
I think it's 30 years.
Yikes. Okay. So, I was thinking about, like, say you're on a plane looking down and there's a landscape and there's birds and there's this and there's that. And it's, but I always thought of them as globes. And so I did, you know, I do a lot of these round pieces based on somewhere I've seen or been or over, you know, in the mountains or not. I've always loved the mountains. That's also from North Carolina. So I've got slip on there and wax on there and glazes on there. And sometimes they're fired more, you know, 3 or 4 times and stuff like that, adding things. It's kind of like painting, I think, on pots. It's basically, and that got more complicated. So then the next pieces are getting more, I mean, that there's a piece that's probably, you know, fired at least 3 or 4 times. And it's got, I don't know if I know how to describe it. First I put a lot of, I like to put porcelain slip on because then it has raised lines. And this one's called Athens, where I've been, and it's I just love Athens and looking up at the Parthenon and all that. No one's going to see that in there, but I do. So, and the water, the proximity of the ocean. And this one, so the first one was made with a wok, okay, 2 woks put together, and then you just work. This is working on the surface for hours, getting them to be the shape I want them to be.
Wait, a wok? Do you mean that you used it as a
cooking wok? So the bottom of it was a wok with a slab in it. And then I may have gone and thrown from there because I see some throwing line stuff. So, but so now what I do is I make them all. I just start with, that was maybe 5 thrown pieces. It's a tall piece. I don't know what to say. It's tall for me. 16 inches maybe.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then I add wedged shaped coils and just keep throwing them up. I actually have large, you know, drawings of the piece, and so that I can measure against where the diameter of the piece is supposed to be as I go. So anyway.
So you plan it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are how I do my shapes, but it's back to the globe shape. Yes, it's all been electric. You know, that's one of the things about joining the clay studio 50 years ago or whatever, it's 48, you know, was that they had a gas kiln. Very exciting. But I've always worked with electric kilns. I think I only got 1 piece in that gas kiln.
1 piece.
So I just thought
the whole reason you joined.
I just thought I'd try it out, you know, and anyway.
Didn't like it. Yeah.
No, I did like it. I just didn't, you know, I guess I felt uncomfortable with it. So,
Okay.
and these are my angel pots. There's some song about the wind beneath my wings, and got me going on angel pots. It's
a good song.
They made a lot of those. And then these
sort of combines the two.
These wings, right? I call this Wyoming crop circles. I don't know if you see the circles down there at the bottom. I went out to Wyoming recently, and flying over it, it's incredible. And the colors and the mountains and everything about it is fabulous. And so that's this piece, which is recent. And
no, back to that.
Oh yeah,
all these.
I was drawing all these kylixes. So when we were at the clay studio on Arch Street, and I had it all ready to go and to make things, and then the building burned down. So I said this was done at the clay studio, but it was conceived at the clay studio. How's that?
Got it.
And it was just the whole Kylix concept of it. And then I've always, collectors. I'm not really a collector, but I bought everything I could afford as I went along. And so, the top one on the left is Kathy's mugs she was making back then. And then that's one of Janice's, the next one to the right is Janice's tea bowl that I remember her sitting there at the wheel on Oriana Street, just continually making these little bitty. And I said, what are they for? What are you going to drink in there? But at any rate, sake. And then the white one on the bottom is mine. And I totally love that thing. It's maybe 3 inches tall, and I cannot make it in any other size. I don't know why. The whole thing about scale in ceramics is fascinating to me. And because some things look a lot better in different sizes. And so I just keep that. And then the plate is Jill's, Bonovitz's. And she said she did those on Oriana Street. So that's what she was doing then.
Well, and it was great to have a studio visit, because one of the things we could talk about was your collection of those early pieces, and yeah, it's really nice to see. I got to visit everyone who was in Founders and Foundations, and every time I talked and heard some of the same stories repeated from different people, and then all different stories, and it was really an honor. So great. I wanted to go back for 1 second and look at your first piece, because what I noticed when I came to your house to see your work were these grids.
Mm.
That in this presentation, there's really only this one, but that's a motif that really carries through your work. Can you talk a little bit about what that is about?
Um, I'm one of these people that think of course, I already told you about the mountains and the birds,
Yes.
but nevertheless, you probably shouldn't talk about it, but because people see that and they think it's architecture, and my husband is an architect. So then, they think, okay, so that's what it is. But really it's looking down from a plane and seeing the fields, what you see from up above it's always been sort of landscape with me.
And it's special because humans didn't used to get to see stuff from that perspective.
That's true. That's true.
And I've heard it from a lot of Paula Winokur and Bob Winokur, both actually talked about a lot of their work being inspired by looking at the American landscape from planes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes.
pretty...
I mean, I just go through my old photographs of anywhere I've traveled, and gets me an idea of, just what to start with on a pot. I mean, once you get to the blazing.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you both for that. I am interested now to just have you both kind of comment on that's here. What do you think about the clay studio now, and what do you hope for it for the future?
Nobody could have ever, but I can't believe there's anyone, and this few of them are on here on the chat, that the clay studio would ever become what it is now. I mean, nobody ever thought, nobody. I mean, we were just talking about maybe having a school, maybe, and I know I think Amy and Kathy, I don't think, Janice, were you involved in the school for the clay studio? Anyway, and that was, but, and then there was the whole nonprofit argument, whether or not to do that. And I think that came about because of the fire. And then, I mean, it's just wonderful. I mean, it's like a university program, I think. Don't you think?
I mean, we do have very nice studios.
It's fabulous.
Yeah. And you've been involved the whole time, which is, I think, really great.
I came and went, and, I came and went, but yeah. But that's the thing. You go to this show that's downstairs, and there's 9 people down that are still know each other, that's still working clay. I mean, it's just sort of shocking. How many? 50 years. It's a long time.
So if you want to stay in touch with your friends, start an organization.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can have a reason to keep getting together.
Yeah, it's only a little bit of work.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Right. We won't talk about that. What about you, Janice?
Yeah, I think about those early days, and I actually just sort of flashed back at us sitting around trying to have our first meeting, and then very early on realizing that we needed some Robert's Rules of Order, because we didn't even know how to kind of like have a official meeting, and then we needed officers, and then so it was interesting, the whole process of how an organization starts from the ground up, and to be part of that is really a cool experience as a young person. And I think maybe that's different now because people are coming into the studio and everything is already formed and set up, and they can slot themselves into it. But I do get the feeling that the place will keep evolving and keep changing. So people will have an opportunity as they come in as new people to kind of help shape it, the same way you're being shaped by the community that you're in now. So I think there's still that a lot of unknowns, which is kind of cool, which I think it's why we're artists. We love problem solving, and we love sort of digging around and even making our own problems so that we could solve them. That's what we do. We make problems so we could solve them. So I think the clay studio now, feels to me like it's open and flexible enough that it will keep evolving. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the future to see what happens.
You know, that's what actually Amy did in many ways. I mean, Amy was right there at the very beginning, and then ended up being the executive director. You know, it became part of her life, and it was possible. I mean, that everyone set up this structure, as you're saying, and then there was a place for her to get in there, and she did an incredible job at it too.
Yeah, I keep thinking, we couldn't imagine what it was going to become, but to give ourselves a little more credit, we just kept going. We kind of just kept, looking for opportunities and changing it. And, and starting a little gallery and starting a little school. And some of it was self-serving, we needed jobs. So we started a school and we taught, but it just kept growing that way. And then the international, and then with each new executive director, they brought in other things and it expanded even more. So it's kind of cool.
That's great. And saying that it feels very stable and wonderful, but it also is like for those of us who work here, it is still, you have to work hard every day, and we feel the value and importance of this place and the responsibility of continuing to make sure that it's healthy and a good place for everyone. And it's not a given. Just go back to what Janice said about it was a given that you were going to be an artist. So these kinds of organizations, we have momentum and things we're feel so supported by the community, but it's because the whole community is working hard all the time. It wouldn't happen without, that's what I'm trying to say. Everyone's still working really hard and we really appreciate it. So it's great. Does anyone have questions for Janice or Claire? We really are actually already over time, but I'm sure we could hang out for 2 more minutes if there was a question that anyone wanted to ask of these two amazing.
Tell us if you got your Stonehenge pieces.
Oh, I do have a bunch of Stonehenge pieces. Once again, I went there, and it was when you could walk in and touch them.
Oh, and
it was unbelievable. There's like 400 species of fungi on them or something like that. And the surface of them was just amazing. And so I did a whole series when I came back. Those are just totally sculptural. Well, no, I made the blue stone in the middle. It did hold water.
You gotta make it do something. The possibility.
I don't have a picture to show you, but it was, it's the sensor is the
top part.
You would know these words, Zena. And then the slab. And what was fascinating is some of the things that stand up have a knob on the top, and then the big giant stones have a hole in them. So that's what kept them together. That when they were made that way.
Mortise and tenon.
I just thought it was fabulous, and just the single ones were so figurative because you have this knob on the top. It's really kind of like a hand. You have this knob on the top. Just take that one away. that is a fabulous looking form, just in and of itself. So I really enjoyed that, making those Zena.
I want to make sure to mention that Janice has a solo show right now. You want to tell us where that is so everyone can go check it out?
I have a show in Atlantic City, New Jersey right now at the Noise Museum Arts Garage. And it's there until March 31st. It was a 2-year grant project that I went into the community and worked with people there and did a whole history of the area that I grew up in. So it was an amazing amount of focus and a joyful experience for me. Thank you.
Well, can I ask you, Janice, why is it called Ducktown?
The question is, why is it called Ducktown?
Oh, that's a good question. The main reason that I've read, and it seems to be backed up, is that when the Italian immigrants came in the 1900s into that area, they raised waterfowl on the bay. So they called it Ducktown.
So it's a
Which-
neighborhood of Atlantic City, is that right?
It's a small section in Atlantic City, yeah. Only a couple block area.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, then I'll also say that if you all want to join us next week, we're going to have Helen Drutt and Jill Bonvitz will be on Plan Conversations. We don't always have a regular schedule, so it happens to be that we have two right after each other. So please tune in again next week, and you can go online and register for that and buy your tickets to Fill a Bowl, which is April 6th, a fundraiser that we're doing with a local organization that focuses on food insecurity in this neighborhood. So check that out. Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Claire. Really appreciate both of you sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
Looks like there's a few more questions.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Feel better.
Well.
Jen.
Bye, Dan.
Bye.